So today we're going to talk about phasing error. I've got a motor phasing error and I can't clear it. So we're going to take a look at the basic setup and try to determine what is the cause of the phasing error. So on the basic setup screen, we can see it's a brushless rotary motor. In this case, I've got a special Sanyo-Denki wire saving motor that's incremental on the motor, and it's also commutating encoder, so it has Halls, and they put the Halls on the ABX inputs on power up or reset, but there's also index and incremental A and B, so I've got 8,000 counts for one rev, and if you're in a trapezoidal mode, you can't get a phase fault, but we want sinusoidal commutation. Trap mode will be very coggy with the motor, so we want the good, smooth sinusoidal commutation. So normally I use the manual phasing screen to check out the phasing of the motor, and you can see this is an illegal Hall state. They're all high. If they're all high, maybe the Halls aren't connected, or there's no reading from this encoder with a comcoder, but I'm cheating here. I forced a phase error. So you can see as soon as the disagreement between the encoder and Halls goes away, then so does the phase fault. And it's really important that the Halls and the encoder agree. So when there's a bad Hall state or count drift or lost counts, they start separating, and the Halls disagree with the encoder for the phase, and then you get a phase fault. So normally I would apply a current and rotate it forward, and so the black needle is moving forward, and the Halls are out of phase here. So I'm just going to do a reset on the drive. Come up in a normal state. Okay, so when I connect, I still got the motor phase fault, so let's take a look at tools manual phase. Again, illegal state. Okay, I got to say okay and save the flash. So let's try that again. Yeah, the phasing looks okay now. So on power up or reset, it reads the Halls and then looks at the encoder, but it still monitors the Halls. If I look at the error log, I can see, well, there was an active fault, but it's gone. But I've gotten phase fault in the past. I did a reset. I got a phase fault. I just did a reset. I did not get a phase fault. So the agreement between the Halls and the encoder is good at the moment. Oh, by the way, no hot swapping, or you'll get a phase fault, especially when you unplug it. But so we'll try the manual phase. I'll give it an amp of current. I'm rotating a current vector. I do have the Halls are like out of phase here, so I'm gonna do I got about a 60-degree lead on this. So let's try 60. Well, let's do minus 60. That looks good. So I'm rotating the current vector, and there's a slight lead in the red indicator. And then when I go reverse, a little bit more lag there. So let me try 90. So I rotate the current vector, the black needle forward, the red indicator slightly leads as I go forward. But notice also the counts must go up when you go forward. And now I go reverse, there's a slight lead, and I can see the counts going down. And so that's pretty good now. I'm just rotating a current vector, open loop, and it does the phasing. So now I should have proper phasing, and I can jog my motor. I don't get a phase fault, and no excessive current for a bad phase. So troubleshooting. It could be a disagreement between the Halls and the encoder, or the encoder and the Halls, a bad Hall state, or count drift. Cabling, grounding, shielding is usually the root. Typically, there's nothing wrong with the Copley drive, so we got to troubleshoot this. If I configure my scope to trigger on the motor phasing angle, I can do event status rising edge fault motor phasing error. I'm just going to leave it as event status miscellaneous in motion because I'm not getting a fault now. But you could trigger on the fault, and you have to record while you're spinning the motor and capture it, or you could make a move. This is a single rev move on 8,000 counts per rev. And what we'll see is an acceleration, a run. I'm going to set the trajectory to 60. Let's go back to the, yeah, that should do it. So I want to get a single rev of the motor here to look for bad Hall states. I see the count. So the magenta is accelerate run for a single rev. The position, if I started at 0, it'll go to 8,000 counts. But you can see the Hall states counting. It's 6 codes that repeat themselves. So on this transition, the phase goes to 0, goes up to 360 and repeats. So the Hall state should repeat. They should be nice fat pulses with no skinny fat ones. You got to have good symmetry. And if you had a bad Hall state, you might see something wrong with the Halls or the motor phase angle. So one way to look at the position is to use the index capture and make sure every time you go by the index, you get the right count. So I've configured get from RAM 0x68 to read the index. As I pass the index, I capture the position. It's configured using the index capture position register, but if I do the homing using the index, the motor will rotate. It'll configure the configuration and it will execute a homing. So I'm doing a move to the 0 position, and every time I go past the index at the 0 position, I should capture or 8,000 counts or 16,000 counts. I'm going to save this and exit. So I'm going to wiggle the motor. I went past the index. It captured 0. If you're always capturing 0, then you haven't configured the capture register, but I configured it by executing a homing. So anyways, if I make a move of 8,000 counts, presumably I pass the index again, but not really. So I have to go a little bit further, give it a wiggle here. And yeah, so every time you go past the index, you should get a capture of the correct value plus or minus a few counts. If this number starts to drift, then you know you have a problem. But another rev would be 16,000 counts. And I got to go a little bit further. There's the index captured position. Every time we go past the index, we capture it. So if I go back to the 0 position, I can also monitor my encoder. Yeah, there's one that's 5 counts off. No big deal. There's the index at 0. It's a count drift that I'm looking for of a certain percentage of like 1/6 of one rev, a whole, or plus or minus 15 degrees of a Hall, or 30 degrees of a Hall state. So I'm going to do a single rev here and capture a good transition. So my encoder started counting at 0 and it went up to 8,000. That's the blue line. And if I had a problem with the count, I would not end at 8,000 and I might see a bad Hall state. I could do 10 revs from 0. Actually, I'm going to start counting at 8,000. So this trace started counting at 8,000, which was the location of the index. And well, it went beyond where I could trace here. So as you go past the index, you should capture a position, and this is not showing the problem. So I'd say the halls look good. The encoder is not drifting. I have multiples of the right counts per rev. But if you had a linear motor, you might have a index capture every 20 millimeters, so you'd have to figure out what the count should be for that. So capture the position with the index and make sure that the count is not drifting. If it is a count drift over time, you'll see it at the captured position relative to the halls. If it's a bad hall state, you definitely would be able to trigger on that occurrence of a bad hall state while you're moving. And again, no hot swapping and cabling, grounding, shielding. Okay, thanks for watching.